welcome to tonight's public meeting regarding the structural cleaning and painting, steel and concrete repairs on the Tobin Bridge. We're going to get started in just a second. I'll turn it over to MassDOT, but I have a few quick housekeeping items right up front. First, we have Spanish translation services available at this meeting. Please, you can raise your hand or see Camila or Alexander, who are sitting right over here, if you need assistance. Also, just a quick note that this meeting is being recorded. MassDOT may choose to retain and distribute the video, images, or audio, and all parts of this meeting are considered public record. By continuing with your attendance in the meeting, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. And if you are not comfortable, you may choose to excuse yourself from the meeting at this time. And then lastly, all MassDOT activities, including this public meeting, are free of discrimination. We welcome diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, I encourage you to reach out to the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Engineer.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Carrie LaValle. I'm the Deputy Administrator and Chief Engineer for MassDOT Highway. I wanted to emphasize for you to please take advantage of the services we have today with our translation, and also know that this entire presentation has a translated copy on the table for anyone interested in getting a copy. I'm here at the request of our Acting Secretary, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, as well as our Highway Administrator, Jonathan Gulliver, because we consider this a very important and crucial project, and we wanted to come here and give you our update. We'll be going through the technical portion with our project manager, John Fallon, and then we will have Trans Systems, our designer of record, will be here as well. We've also invited the Department of Public Health to give a brief presentation, and we also have our contractor in place, so you can ask them any specific questions you may have as well. We do ask that you hold questions till the end of the full presentation, and then we'll open it up. Mike O'Dowd, the Director of Major Projects, and myself will be here all evening to make sure that we can answer all the questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Fallon. I work in the Major Projects section at MassDOT as a project manager. So tonight's presentation, the agenda is very similar to the agenda that we had for the June 28th public information meeting. One of the differences for tonight's presentation is we do have representation from the Department of Public Health that will speak at the end, and they have some information, some slides that they'll present. But in general, the agenda for this meeting tonight is just to talk about the project background, why it was initiated, the goals, the construction approach, and environmental and community related topics. So again, my name is John Fallon, project manager at MassDOT. We also have here from MassDOT tonight the Chief Engineer, Carrie LaValle, that you just met. Mike O'Dowd, Director of Major Projects, is also here tonight. From the MassDOT's design consultant for this project is Scott Darling from Trans Systems. The public involvement lead is Patrick Martin from HMTV. And the representative from the Department of Public Health is Terry Howard. And we also have a bunch of folks from the contractor, joint venture Liberty and SPS, that are also at the meeting tonight, sitting in the back. So with all our public meetings and hearings and informational meetings, we try to post the notices in many type of avenues where people can get noticed of the meeting and be aware of when it is. So it was run in the local newspapers, the Chelsea Record and the Daily Item and El Planeta. There was media advisories issued, MassDOT website posted the meeting flyer, email blast, social media, etc. So in the next couple of slides, we'll talk about just lead paint chips in general. Lead paint was the industry standard for quite a while on steel structures, bridges, radio towers, for decades. So this is not unique to the Tobin Bridge. The residual lead paint, it's estimated that 30% of all steel structures in the United States still have lead paint. Lead paint was suspended for use in 1978, but it was allowed for commercial and industrial applications. And lead paint for most steel structures was largely suspended in 1992 in Massachusetts. So the Tobin Bridge is old, it's 75 years old, it's been painted a number of times. The winters over the last several years have been varied, especially this last winter. There was one weekend in February where I think it was 2 days it was below zero, and then the following day it was in the 50s. And this freeze-thaw cycle resulted in a lot of delamination or paint chips falling off the bridge. And we heard the same from the other New England DOTs. They experienced the same thing as well this past year, significantly. So there's a bunch of measures that are going on for cleanup that are interim measures that you may be aware of, you've seen out there. We've been working in the area for the past several months, vacuuming up paint chips that have fallen from the bridge. The chips are disposed of off-site in accordance with the environmental regulations. MassDOT is continuing to coordinate with city officials to provide them with weekly updates on the progress of the cleanup and removal. Regular weekly inspections are ongoing and will continue until the larger bridge painting project. An interim netting system was also installed this summer in parallel with the ongoing cleanup activities. And the community hotline, which has been established for a little while now, has been set up for getting feedback, questions, whatnot, and concerns. So this slide here shows you some pictures of the netting system that's out in place currently on the Tobin Bridge that was installed this summer. Right, so for the project background, the length of the project is about a half-mile section of the Tobin Bridge encompassing the Chelsea approach and ramps. The lower level of the bridge structure, the northbound Route 1, includes Beacon Street ramps, and the upper level main lines, which is southbound Route 1, includes the Everett Ave ramp. So this slide graphic really just represents the varying limits for this project, and as you can see, it's the Chelsea side of the bridge, and it includes areas of painting, concrete repair, and steel painting. And so the work is going to take place on the upper level, lower sections of the bridge for that half-mile stretch. So with this slide here, I think that the first thing I kind of want to point out is MassDOT took over ownership and responsibility for the Tobin Bridge from Massport in 2009. And so this graphic shows the different contracts for maintenance and whatnot that we've put out and have done since that time. And if you note, the first one was on the big bridge, the main bridge painting, but the second contract that we did when we took ownership was the cross girder repairs in the Chelsea section. So the contractor for this project is a joint venture between Liberty and SPS. The total contract value is approximately $128 million. The funding source is 100% Tobin Bridge toll funds. The project was advertised for bids on June 24th, and bids were opened on August 29th, and the contract was awarded on September 25th this year. And the contract notice to proceed is anticipated within a day or so, very soon. And work we anticipate to commence in early November. So this point, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Darling from Trans Systems to talk about why this project was initiated.
Thanks, John. So why was this project initiated? The bridge was built in 1950. It's aging, sees significant traffic volumes, and the failing paint is leading to steel deterioration. And just to note, the bridge is currently safe for travel, even with these issues that are ongoing. The Chelsea approach the southbound approach was last painted in 1996, and the northbound approach was last painted in 1999, and the substructure had its last major rehabilitation in 1997. So what do we hope to accomplish with this project? We want to preserve the existing Chelsea approach to maintain it in a state of good repair, address typical maintenance activities, and target elements that are most in need of repair. And now the construction approach. The contract requires temporary protective shielding, work platforms, and containment as early as possible once the project starts. There's disincentive clauses in the contract encouraging the contractor to submit plans and install temporary protective shielding within 120 days of the notice to proceed. And the paint chip cleanup will transfer over to the new contract within 7 days of the notice to proceed. So the contractor is going to clean the existing steel, remove the old paint on the lower level main line, the Beacon Street ramp, the upper level main line, and the Everett Avenue ramp. They're going to perform repairs to the existing steel superstructure and safety walk elements at the lower levels and on the ramps as well. Upon completing the steel repairs, they'll paint the existing steel and perform repairs to the substructure elements. So how will the road user be affected? Construction operations will be conducted in ways that minimize the impacts to the traveling public. There's going to be no permanent lane closures on the bridge during construction, no impacts to adjacent roadways, and coordination will take place with nearby construction projects to minimize impacts. So starting in spring of 2024, phase 1 will start. There'll be, as you can see, there's still 3 lanes of traffic. There's no permanent lane closures, as I said. Work will be performed, some work will have to be performed during off-peak hours, and this will all be communicated in advance to the public. The lanes are just going to shift over one direction. Similarly, starting in spring of 2026, phase 2 will start. Again, the lanes will shift in the opposite direction, but there's still 3 lanes available. Some work will need to be performed during off-peak hours, but it'll be, again, communicated to the public. So environmental, cultural, resource, and community impacts. The project includes numerous monitoring and mitigation measures. The contractor is required to monitor air quality. The contractor is required to monitor the environment during all operations that will disturb the lead-based paint. The contractor is required to monitor and document site conditions for the soil. Contract requires construction-related noise be controlled throughout the duration of the work. Contract requires construction-related dust emissions to be controlled and monitored throughout the duration of the work. And no right-of-way impacts as work is contained within the MassDOT easement, but the project will coordinate with abutters under the bridge. So air quality monitoring. The following air quality monitoring activities will be conducted. We're going to do a baseline pre-project monitoring to establish the baseline levels. Lead monitoring will be in accordance with applicable regulations and standards. Excessive emissions shall be caused to shut down the project until the work activities or containment are modified to control the emissions. The contractor will have all filters analyzed for lead. The contractor will conduct visible emissions assessments in accordance with federal regulations. Contractors shall submit a monitoring program to ensure the protection of the environment for lead paint. The monitoring program shall include provisions for the placement of monitors for sensitive receptors and will be required during all operations that will disturb the paint. The program will include assessments of visible emissions and releases, a written program for the observation of any visible emissions during the project activities, sensitive receptor survey. This is a map, the written narrative identifying sensitive receptors, such as schools, hospitals, child care facilities. Cleaning of soil, water, and sediment. In the event that the post-project inspection shows unacceptable results, the contractor will remove debris from the soil, water, or sediment. And a written program for the instrument monitoring of emissions to assure compliance with the project specifications and applicable state or federal regulations. Likewise, with soil monitoring, at the start of the project, the contractor is required to inspect the site and document the condition. The inspection shall document any debris, including but not limited to the chips that have failed, spent abrasive, construction material, or other debris from past coating maintenance or construction activity. The site will then be inspected at the end of the project, and if it is determined that the documented condition has been exacerbated by the work performed, the contractor will return the site to the documented clean condition. Noise mitigation. The contractor is required to comply with all applicable noise regulations, specification requirements, and noise level limits, and will develop a noise control program. Work will be conducted in a manner that will minimize the disturbance to the public in areas adjacent to the work. And equipment with sufficient noise suppression devices will be used, and the contractor will employ noise abatement measures for the protection of the public. Here's a list of some typical construction equipment with the limits that are placed upon those as part of the project, and then comparison to some typical other sounds that you would hear in the environment as well. And this right here shows the immediate impact areas where receptors and some of the secondary areas as well that receptors will be placed for noise and air quality monitoring. And dust monitoring control. The contractor is going to be responsible for controlling construction-related dust emissions at all times and shall develop a plan for that. The contractor is responsible for monitoring and controlling dust in accordance with all applicable standards and regulations.
Thanks, Scott. So just gonna walk through a little simple timeline of where we are now and takes us through to the end of the project. So right now, the contract's awarded, the notice to proceed is anticipated within a day or days, very soon. When the contractor takes over, they will be holding a public meeting in the spring of 2024. Stage 1 construction begins. The public meeting will be held at that time as well. So with any major construction activity, the contract requires the contractor to hold a public meeting just to inform the area abutters. So in the spring of 2026, the stage 2 construction begins. In winter 2027, the work is pretty much complete, and then in spring of 2028, the final completion and project closeout is anticipated. So how will we keep you informed going forward? So the construction contract has a pretty robust public outreach item in it for the contractor to carry out. So it includes having meetings at various major points in the project, a public meeting soon after they start work. A project website's been established, regular construction updates will be prepared and made known, and continued public meetings to provide the status and milestones will take place So these are some of the ways that people can reach us with concerns, questions, comments. So this is available in the handout if you want to grab a copy of that too, just so you have them. But there's a website, you can submit comments to our email address, and you can submit written comments to the address listed here at 10 Park Plaza. So at this point, I turn it over to Terry from the Department of Public Health to talk about some of the public health slides.
Thank you. That's my favorite. Do you mind holding the slides for me because I tend to talk with my hands and I think I'll be doing it first time. Hi everyone, I'm Terry Howard. I'm the Deputy Director for the Bureau of Climate and Environmental Health. We just changed our name. I was with the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program for basically my entire career since 1994. And last year I actually became the Deputy Director, so I'm still responsible for the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program, which we call CLIP, but I also oversee a couple other programs as well. So I'm really thrilled to be here tonight. It's great to see people taking time out of their schedule to come learn about lead. Once a lead head, always a lead head. I can always talk about this. So thank you for having me, and I'm happy to answer some questions once I go through some basic stuff about childhood lead poisoning. Next slide. Okay, so this is straight from our website. Whoops, back one. It just talks about what we do and what our mission is. So we help prevent, screen, diagnose, and treat childhood lead poisoning. We work to eliminate sources of poisoning through research, educational, epidemiological, clinical, and environmental activities. Specifically, we maintain our surveillance and case management database. We license private and public lead inspectors. We provide case management services, clinical, community health worker, and environmental services. And now I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to introduce Maria Lopez-Mosquilla. She's over here. She graciously agreed to come out with me tonight. She is our code enforcement lead inspector who handles the North Shore, and she investigates the homes of lead-poisoned children. So in the end of the evening, if anyone has any questions or wants to chat with Maria, she's available. So clinical, community health worker, and environmental services. So the clinical piece, we have clinical coordinators in the lead program who talk every day to doctors' offices. And basically they reach out to the doctor's offices to talk about children who've been identified as being lead poisoned, to talk about when they need to get screened next, to talk about what services we offer, to sort of let the doctor know what it is that we found when we went to investigate their home. The community health worker goes to the home, they do a home assessment, and basically during that home assessment they talk to the family and they figure out where do the parents think their child got exposed, what condition the home is in, are they seeing active renovation, anything that's really alarming that needs to sort of bump that case up in our triage. And then they also talk about linkages, like does the family need additional services, do they need WIC, do they need early intervention, do they need fuel assistance? And that's the community health worker's job. And then last but not least, we have the environmental piece, which is the code enforcement lead inspector. And our code enforcement lead inspectors use an instrument called an X-ray fluorescence analyzer, and they go through a child's home and they inspect the inside of the home, the common areas of the home, and the exterior of the home to make sure that there's no lead hazards there. And then if they do find lead hazards, they issue an order to correct to the property owner, and that requires the property owner to bring that home into compliance with the lead law to get rid of or remediate those lead hazards. Okay, so that's a little bit about our case management. We also investigate complaints against licensed inspectors, or if there's a licensed letting contractor who might not be doing work the way they're supposed to. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We would also work with our sister agency, the Department of Labor Standards, and who licenses the letters. And last but not least, we do outreach and training, and that's something that Maria is also actively involved with, and she's recently this summer did some trainings here, actually in Chelsea. Next slide, please. Okay, so how does lead affect children? Lead is a neurotoxin. There is no safe level of lead, 0. It's not supposed to be in your body. Young children are more vulnerable to the effects of lead because their bodies and brains are less developed. So basically what happens is, and I'm going to talk about this in the next slide, but I'll jump ahead. Children accidentally eat leaded dust. And they eat the leaded dust, it goes into their gut, and from the gut it goes into their blood. And from the blood, it travels all over their body through all their soft tissue, most importantly their brain. And it basically does a lot of damage as it goes through their body. And the reason why it's so particularly dangerous for children is because of two things. One, it's because of their behaviors, their normal behaviors, their developmental behaviors. And two, because their bodies are developing, the blood-brain barrier is thinner in children, so lead crosses over it more easily. So it does more damage. So just some pictorials of sort of it. So it damages the brain and the nervous system. It slows growth and development. It causes learning and behavioral problems. It can cause hearing and speech problems. So it can lower IQ. It can decrease the ability to pay attention. And it's correlated to underperformance in schools. So even low levels of lead can negatively affect a child's development. And there's often no signs or symptoms of lead exposure. Sometimes families report that the child is having a difficult time sleeping or the child is cranky. For those of you who are parents, I'm sure we can relate that that's not necessarily an indication of lead exposure. Children get cranky, they have a hard time sleeping. So really we call it asymptomatic. Next slide, please. So we talked about this already a little bit, and I think this is really important to keep in mind. Most children are exposed to lead because they accidentally eat it. I used to joke with people when I did these presentations, I'd say in my house there was a 5-minute rule, it wasn't a 5-second rule, but basically what happens is the cookie falls on the floor, the cookie goes in the mouth, the dust that's on the floor goes in their mouth and goes into their body. So they accidentally eat the leaded dust. So the dust typically comes from old leaded windows and doors, which they're friction surfaces, they generate dust. There's loose and peeling lead paint, inside or outside, and from unsafe renovation. So any of those things can cause leaded dust. And windows, I've been doing this a long time. I used to say windows were sort of the Bermuda Triangle of lead hazards, and that's still true. But a lot of windows have been replaced. That's how long I've been doing this. So again, the lead law, someone mentioned in an earlier slide, paint was banned in 1978. It started being phased out of residential paint in the 50s. So if you have old leaded windows, you have really old windows because it's 2023. It may be time to get new windows that are more energy efficient that might not have lead paint on it. But windows are particularly troublesome for kids because they tend to be highly leaded. They tend to be in poor condition. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of weathering. And they're also a real focal point for kids. Kids love to go look out the window and look at the world and see what's around them. So they really draw children over to something that can be really hazardous. Okay, so I talked about this. Lead dust gets on hands and toys when children play, and then they accidentally ingest it or eat it. And that's a normal behavior. That's how children learn, especially 2- and 3-year-olds. That's how they learn their world. Some children develop a little bit earlier, but they explore their worlds through mouthing, and that's how they get exposed. They can also breathe in lead dust during unsafe renovation work, which is why we have that picture over there as well. Next slide. So screening in Massachusetts. It's kind of interesting because I've done presentations in Massachusetts and I've done presentations nationally, and when I present on a national level, I'll say things like Massachusetts has a screening rate of 72%, and people will be like, that is amazing. How did you do that? That's amazing. You're screening 72% of your kids. And I'm like, yes, I'm so proud. We have a great program. And then I'll come to Massachusetts and I'll present in Massachusetts and I'd say, our screening penetration rate is 72%. And immediately people will be like, that's just not good enough. That means you're missing 28% of your kids. And I'll be like, you're absolutely right. You're right. So we still have work to go. But we do have a great screening penetration rate generally in Massachusetts, and I'm going to get a little bit more specific into some Chelsea numbers towards the end of the presentation. So screening children. So children in Chelsea must be screened once between the ages of 9 and 12 months, again at age 2, at age 3, and at age 4, because Chelsea is considered a high-risk community, and I'll talk about what that means towards the very end of the presentation. When they screen a child, there's 2 ways to screen. One is called a capillary, and the other one is a venous. Now the capillary test, it's also called a finger stick. It's just a finger prick. They take a little needle, they poke it in your finger, and they test it that way. The problem with capillary sampling is about 70% of it is falsely elevated. Let me say that again, 70% is falsely elevated. So that means that a parent gets a phone call and says, I'm sorry to let you know that your child has a capillary test result of X, and now you need to go back into the doctor and you need to have a venous test done. And there's some sort of period of time where, as a parent, you're panicking because your child has this possible lead level and you're in panic stations. And whereas 70% of them are falsely high, I think that's a stress that as a parent, I wouldn't want to go through. The reason why capillary sampling is available is because some areas don't have the infrastructure, the medical infrastructure to do venous testing. So venous testing, generally for kids, you need a pediatric phlebotomist because they're going to be putting the needle into the child's vein and drawing the blood from the vein. But it's a much more accurate test. And so if there's the capacity in the area, then I would strongly recommend that you have a venous test result done, and that way you don't have to go through the stress of having a falsely elevated capillary test. Children must have a proof of at least one lead test, but we talked about having 4 lead tests at least before entering childcare, preschool, or kindergarten. Can everybody hear me okay? I don't know. Okay, good.
Just a suggestion, if you change the color on the children in Chelsea.
To white so you can see it better?
Yes.
Sure.
It'd be a big help.
Absolutely, I can paint. Do you want me to go over it just so you're clear?
No,
Okay.
I fully.
Okay. And I just one more thing to add about that is when the reason why it's 9 to 12 months is it has to do with children being mobile. So children are mobile at different ages, right? So I had a niece who was literally running across the room at 13 months. It was very scary. And then other kids take a lot longer to become mobile. So once they're crawling and walking around, that mobility, so that they can get into and touching that dust, that's when it becomes a real exposure risk. As opposed to a newborn who's relatively confined and sitting still, that's far less risky for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so some collaboration and outreach. So I know we just sort of went over a lot of the conversations that have already happened since the spring. We talked about climate change, so I have to take this moment, since I'm now the Deputy Director of the Bureau of Climate and Environmental Health, to just point out that it was not even a year when I thought I'd moved from lead to climate and environmental health before I was brought back in because of climate to a lead issue. And the more and more I do stuff with climate, the more I realize it's really touching all of our worlds in so many different ways. And so it was this climate change issue that they talked about, this freeze-thaw cycle that was really exacerbated last winter that caused more deterioration of the paint. And so when I learned about that, we met with MassDOT and we sort of were talking about what happened. The first thing I did when I came away from that meeting is I reached out to my field staff and I said, I need to talk to you guys. Have you noticed anything happening in Chelsea? Anything of your cases, when you're assigning these cases, have you noticed a pattern? And overwhelmingly the response was, no, I have not noticed a pattern. But I did take the time to then go through the caseload since 2020 of our poisoned children to look at the cases and read the case notes and look at the inspection reports, just to make sure that there wasn't something that our staff maybe missed. And I did not find any pattern of exposure relative to the Tobin Bridge. I did honestly find one small pattern, which it's small, 2 cases, but one of the things that did jump out at me was there was a couple cases where occupational exposure was an issue. So for future reference for our staff doing outreach, I'd like them to start talking a little bit more about occupational exposure in Chelsea. But I'm going to talk about what I'm really, our #1 concern is in the lead program in 1 second. So sorry. So again, I reviewed the caseload from 2020 for proximity to the Tobin Bridge and for exposure source information. They were all out of the area of concern. There was one that might have been sort of within that area, but there was also renovation work that the inspector was considered was the exposure source. At the time, we quickly took one of our fact sheets and we sort of repurposed it and we shared it with MassDOT so that they were going to go through the neighborhoods and they wanted to make sure that they could share that fact sheet with folks too to provide our information in case parents were concerned about lead exposure for their children. We also shared that fact sheet with early education and child care and asked them to share it with their child care centers in Chelsea. Since then, we've worked closely with EPA Region 1. Maria, actually I mentioned, did a presentation over the summer. Head Start with the Chelsea Health Department with Flora Amaya, Green Roots, and we also just did an in-service with the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center. And then last but not least, I'm excited to say that we just began in September. We launched a home visiting pilot project for children who have blood levels between 5 to 9 micrograms per deciliter. And that's something that we'd also been doing in Lawrence and Worcester, and we just started in Chelsea as well. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a copy of the fact sheet, but I just like these pictures, so I just want to, I'm really sort of want to mention this again. So you'll see up top there the first two don'ts, and the don't there is showing a child playing in the soil, picking stuff up, and the next one is feeding a baby outside. And as a parent, I know that feeding a child outside has lots of, you know, it sounds really idyllic. You can have a picnic outside, and as someone who, as a mom with young kids, you don't want food all over your house. It's sort of a win-win. They eat outside, they'll get food everywhere. The downside is when they eat outside, if they're eating near bare soil, then they might actually eat some of that soil. And if that soil is contaminated, then they're accidentally eating the lead. And some other things that are good ideas to do, one is to get your child screened. Hand washing. I have to say, if I had one public health message, and it couldn't be lead specific, that I had to tell the world, it would be to wash your hands. I think we all know from lots of different things how critical it is to wash your hands. It's critical for lead exposure too. Again, lead dust gets on their hands, the hands go in their mouth, and they eat the dust. Same thing with the idea with the mat. Simple things like leaving your shoes outside or in the front hallway, and having a mat by your door helps. Pets can bring in lead dust on their paws or some dirt on their paws, so it's good to keep them clean. Some pictures of raised beds for vegetable gardens and washing it. Same for sandboxes. And then last but not least, and I want to highlight this, is making sure that you keep your home maintained. And that's a picture of someone painting outside. But again, that climate change issue, so we're talking about that freeze-thaw cycle that became a problem for the Tobin Bridge. That's also going to be a problem for paint on the outside of people's homes, right? That same paint is paint, and it's going to have a hard time staying on that structure. So that becomes a real issue for folks if their house is chipping and peeling. It can be a real risk for kids. Next slide, please. Okay, so protecting children from lead hazards. So if your child is under the age of 6 years old and your home was built before 1978, then you must be in compliance with the lead law. So to find out if your home has lead hazards, you can check out our Lead Safe Homes website. Any home that's ever been inspected or has a compliance letter, we put that information online so you can find out about that. If you rent your home, you can check out the website, but you can also ask the property owner if there's a compliance letter. If there's not a compliance letter, you can ask to have your home inspected if you have a child under the age of 6 and if it was built before 1978. Alternatively, if you don't want to ask your property owner if the home is in compliance, you can also contact local health departments. Chelsea actually has inspectional services, so you can contact Chelsea Inspectional Services, and you can ask to have what's called a code enforcement lead determination. And what that means is someone from the health department can go out and do a spot check for lead, and if they find a lead hazard, then they would issue an order to correct to the property owner, and he or she would need to bring that property into compliance with the lead law. If you own your own home, then you can hire a private lead inspector, and that's an active link, and you can, it's also, they're posted on our website, and you can hire a private lead inspector. The lead inspector would go out and do an inspection. They don't issue orders to correct, but they would give you a full report showing you where all the lead hazards are in your home. Yes. Financial help for deletting. So the first thing in yellow, parents and property owners should not wait for a child to be exposed before deletting their home. There was his name was Dr. Michael Shannon, and he was with Boston Children's Hospital for many, many years. He was an amazing doctor, and we worked really closely with him. Unfortunately, he passed too early. But if you Google him, you will see a YouTube video that he had posted many years ago. And in that video, he talks about not treating children like a canary in a coal mine. And so to understand that analogy, for folks that don't know, coal miners used to bring canaries with them when they went down into a coal mine, and when the canary died, it meant that it was dangerous and they needed to leave the coal mine to keep themselves safe. So when you wait to delete your home until after your child has lead poisoning, you're treating that child like a canary. It's too late. The exposure has already happened, the damage is already done, and lead poisoning and the damages from it is irreversible. So you need to be proactive, and you need to get your home deleted before a child is exposed. So here's some resources about getting your home deleted. So we're really fortunate in Massachusetts to have a Get the Lead Out loan program. In Chelsea, there's the Chelsea Restoration Company that actually administers the Get the Lead Out loan program. So I encourage you to take a look at them and reach out to them. And also, there is a HUD lead hazard control program. And last but not least, I know I'm such a leadhead nerd, but I'm super excited about this. This just happened. So the governor just doubled our tax credit. It used to be $1,500, and now it's $3,000. This is hot off the presses, big news. So that if you delete your home, you are now eligible for a tax credit of $30,000. And so this is also just a link to our website that talks about some of the financial assistance for delaying. Next slide. Okay, so I did say that I was going to talk a little bit about screening in Chelsea and some Chelsea-specific numbers. And this is not good news. But what is good news is that, you know, it's a Tuesday night and there's this many people here wanting to learn about lead. So I'm really thrilled that I get the opportunity to talk about it. So I talked about the fact that we have a very high screening rate in Massachusetts compared to other states. And it's 72%. One of the things that happened, one of the many things that happened with the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is that screening penetration for lead screening with the stay-at-home order, doctors were busy dealing with other things, and the screening penetration in Massachusetts went way down. At the same time, the prevalence rate for children of lead exposure actually went up for the first time in a number of years, which was really concerning because a lot of people were stuck inside in their homes, where I just mentioned where we're most concerned about lead exposure. And people also started doing a lot of DIY projects. And I also talked about how unsafe renovation work can expose kids. So it was not a good time even from the lead world. Since then, our screening rates have started to go back up. So we're back up to where we started before the COVID-19 pandemic, but Chelsea is not. And that's why I'm here tonight to talk to all of you and see if we can't figure out how to work together and make sure we get the word out for folks to make sure that they bring their children to the doctor to get screened. So in 2017, Chelsea had one of the highest screening rates in Massachusetts, 93%, well above the statewide average. Gold star, amazing. It started to go down a little bit, but you can see fluctuations in populations. That's not unexpected. Still well above the statewide screening average. All right, but then you see the pandemic hits and it's 2022 and we're still at 66%. So unlike other areas where we've gone back up to the 72%, that is not the case in Chelsea. So we definitely have work to do. We have outreach and education that we need to do, and that Maria's been doing. We need to work with our East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, I mentioned before, and Chelsea Community Health Center to make sure that folks are screening and bringing their kids in to get their child checkups. So just generally, I did also mention that Chelsea is considered a high-risk community. And basically what that means is they look at 5 years, and they look at the incidence rate for lead exposure, they look at the age of housing, and they look at poverty rates, and that's all used to calculate high risk. And for the most part, it vacillates a little bit, but for the most part, Chelsea's been on the high-risk community list pretty much the entire time I've been at the lead program. So for many, many, many years. Sometimes it goes on and off, but for the most part, it's on that risk, which means that children need to be screened at age 4. Next slide, please. Okay, so why are we still talking about lead? Because lead exposure is completely preventable, yet every year thousands of children are exposed and it causes permanent damage to health, especially cognitive function. We are not screening 100% of the children. And we have a really old housing stock in Massachusetts. 69% of our housing stock was built before 1978. And it is a real health equity issue. Low-income children and children of color are much more likely, 3.6 times more likely if you're low income, to have an elevated blood level. And multi-race children and black children are more likely than white children to be exposed to lead. So it's a critical health equity issue. It's an environmental justice issue, which is why we're here tonight, to sort of really make sure we get out the word, to make sure that these kids get screened, and that people understand how to make sure that their home is in compliance with the lead law. So I think that's the last of my slides, other than the fact that I realized the very last one, which has like the Twitter and that stuff, I forgot to put my contact information on there. So I'm just going to tell you what my contact information is, and also Maria has cards later if you want to grab a card from her. So my name is earlier in the presentation. It's Terry, Terry.Howard, HOWARD, @mass.gov. And that's how they'll be able to reach me from an email. And do we want to open up for questions or?
Ask any questions, so pass the mic around and then Chief or John might come answer those. Anyone?
I consider this an excellent health class, and also for someone who is not an engineer or painter. But my questions are, in the reconstruction, will there be any fixing of the cement that supports the metal? Because I can show you pictures that go back. I'm not that, I'm a little new to the city, 15 years ago. And it's a matter of, I saw back then, and I have pictures I can show you that show the supporting structures. You can see the rebar, and that was in 2017. And now, what is happening?
So I want to make sure everyone can hear me. Can you guys hear me in the back? So I can do it on the mic. So substructure repairs are included in this contract, and I don't know if every location that you've seen is included, but we do have substructure, which means the concrete repairs included as a part of this contract.
My other question is, I've heard on the news lately, they're talking about doing something, either a different bridge or, because that is a vastly traveled, I think something like 87,000 cars go over there every day. And I can't see spending all this money to do something that will very shortly be taken down.
So what you're probably referring to is we initiated after our last, not last meeting, but maybe the one before, one of the comments people had is, what is your future plan for the project? So we initiated a Tobin Bridge study. The study is going to take time. It does not mean that we're going to have a project quickly enough that we feel like it isn't still important to do these substructure as well as paint and superstructure repairs. So we still think this project is crucial. And then we will be doing a Tobin study, which will include people, advocacy groups, Chelsea, neighbors, and everyone like that to kind of evaluate what we want to do for the Tobin Bridge structure because of its age.
And that will be started in 2030.
We do not have a plan yet for the construction, but we are initiating the study. That was announced maybe 6 weeks ago, that we're starting a study to kind of evaluate the condition of this. Obviously, we know the condition of the structure, but to evaluate what we would want to do in this area. It's a very complicated location, and we are starting a study to look at all the options. We are looking at transit and complete streets and all the other ones.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I have some technical questions. On page 11, it says that the chips are going to be disposed of, quote unquote, off-site. What does dispose mean and what does off-site mean?
So they're taken away in a barrel and they're put to a hazardous maintenance location off-site that is not in Chelsea. So it is something that we work with our DEP and other groups to make sure we take all the hazardous materials, we vacuumed it all up, we put it into barrels, and the barrels will be taken off-site and disposed of in the correct manner as regulated.
What does dispose of in the correct manner mean?
So I'm not an environmental engineer, so I don't want to say it wrong. I don't exactly know how they manage their disposal, but it is a method that is regulated by our environmental partners.
And do those departments include the federal government?
It includes, I know it's our local DEP. I don't know if we are including the federal government for this portion because we use non-federal aid, but for the final portion we will be because we are receiving federal aid for the Tobin, the larger project.
And who do I contact to get that specific
If you want to give me your contact information at the end of this, I can get you in touch with our environmental section. We have a whole hazardous materials section that works on this for all hazardous materials.
And I have an engineering question. Since a lot of this delamination happened because of climate change, and these wild winters and thawing and then wild summers. And since it's been going on over 20, 25 years, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a 4-month window to get all the job done?
Oh, no, it's multiple years. We're gonna have a 4-month window to make sure that we have the permanent shielding during the construction phase of the project up. That's what they refer to as the 120 days. That's just to make sure that we have more than, we're not gonna just have the netting, we're gonna have full shielding, fully encapsulating the bridge structure. That is supposed to be done within 120 days of the notice to proceed. The project itself, I believe, was 3.5 years, 4 years.
Wow. But that's for the whole state, not just for Chelsea, right?
No, that's just this project will take 4 years.
Just for Chelsea?
Just for this one portion that we've shown for the project limits, and then that is primarily because we are keeping all the travel lanes open. If we were to take a travel lane, the project could accelerate, but we feel like the impacts would be too great to the community as well as to the people going in and out of the city, so we are not taking travel lanes.
And maybe one of the engineers here can answer this question. You're going to be sanding, I take it, or
Sandblasting,
somehow
yeah.
getting rid of the old rust and the lead and prep the surface for painting. That can be done during the winter. Will some of the painting be done during the winters in this 4-year period?
So the bridge will be fully encapsulated, temperature constraints will be in there. I don't think we have the full construction schedule, but we'll work with our contractor. The winter temperature would probably be too cold.
We're looking at a couple different options to get us through this winter.
Yep.
What makes sense.
Yeah, there's certain repairs that just because of temperature constraints you can't do either, not just the painting, but some of the metal work we wouldn't be able to do when it's the coldest part of the winter, but this project will have continuous work the whole time. It just might not be
What's the
on.
composition of the paint? Is there any lead in the paint?
The new paint, no, there's 0 lead in the new paint.
And how long will it last?
25 years?
You think? 25 years?
That's our goal. That's what we've been told. I mean, we're going to be monitoring it and inspecting it on a regular inspection schedule like we do now on our bridge, but there is no lead paint in this. Yeah, I'm just going to hand it
I'm
out.
all set now. I mean,
Oh,
some
I
of the
answered all
questions,
your
yeah.
questions.
I want to thank Mike for those questions. Those questions came up. They were very interesting questions. I was talking about the timeline, and I believe I met some of the construction workers or some of the paint folks that was de-leading the paint off the bridge. And I just wanted to, I kept seeing the debris fall down. And you talk about netting, and I'm just wondering when you're going to include the netting in the vacuum to suck that air in so those dust frigids don't go into neighbors underneath the bridge and also up in the area.
The netting and the vacuums are already on site. They
Okay.
have been since last spring. So the netting was more recently, but the vacuuming has
Okay.
been going on since we were first notified, I would say late spring, early summer.
Okay, because I was out there, the netting wasn't there, so.
It's not in all the locations.
Okay.
It's in the bottom up to the fascia beams. So it's not covering everywhere in the same locations as when we do the full project where we will have the full encapsulation of the bridge, it will be further than where the netting is now.
Thank you.
Senator DiDomenico, who just joined us, if you'd like to make any comments or ask any questions.
You probably don't like what I'm going to say. So, I just came in off the street, so I didn't see the presentation, but I came with for one reason only. Every project that I've seen on the Tobin Bridge, Chelsea curves, paint mitigation, dust control, in my mind, has not been adequate. And the residents that I serve, who are putting up with the Tobin Bridge right next to their house for several years, deserve better. And I drive over the Tobin, and I'm not saying this to you because you're not the contractor. I have my issues with the contractors that have been working on that bridge for several projects. When I call to correct the issue, it gets corrected, but we shouldn't have to keep calling to get issues corrected. So my question is, when there's an issue happening on the bridge. So I drive over that bridge several times a week. And I have seen when they were cleaning out the railings, they had many vacuums lined up, not one being used. They were sitting there, and the work was being done, and things were falling off the bridge. Now, I saw that with my own eyes, so someone didn't tell me that. I have seen when the Chelsea Curves project was happening, the dust flying everywhere, and cars being inundated with dust, and air conditioners blowing all that junk into people's homes. Their backyard full of dust. Now, the contractor had the best laid plans, because I just quickly looked over the packet. The plans sound great. But what are we going to do when the contractor doesn't do the right thing? Who is on site? Are the contractors monitoring themselves? So will there be people overnight as well?
There will be district staff on site.
On site during the entire duration?
There will be a resident engineer or a construction inspector from MassDOT on site.
Okay, so I hope that's true, because the last time when the Chelsea Curves project happened, I'm not sure if they were there, or they were taking a break, or they didn't show up those days, because the dust was flying everywhere for days. And we have the pictures to prove it. So I'm taking your word for it that that's not going to be the case this time around. But just wanted everyone to know in this room, not just you folks, I'm going to be watching. Because I'm tired of what the residents had to go through last time. And Tony, who's here, emailed me overnight, in the middle of the night, with dust flying everywhere and writing on cars. Like you can write with dust on cars, that's how much dust was flying off that bridge during the project. So, I'm not saying this to you because it sounds like I'm attacking you folks, but I am attacking the contractors who did the work last time. Is it the same contractors who did the work this time?
So,
It's not the same.
I don't think it's two locations.
Not the same, so you have this person has not worked on this bridge before?
They have
Underneath
worked
the
on other
bridge.
parts of the bridge, but not the Chelsea.
But I'm not just talking about Chelsea Curves, but also the paint removal in the past, because I've had an issue with that as well, where they had vacuums on the bridge.
I can go through the contract.
Okay, because I just don't have a lot of faith, because they had the vacuums on the deck, and they weren't using them.
So there was some maintenance jobs too, where they were cleaning out catch basins, which caused a little bit of a mess. So that might have been some of the recent projects, but we're working with our maintenance staff on that.
Okay, I just wanted you to know that I'm on that bridge a lot. And if I see an issue, unfortunately Dan's gonna get a call, but we're gonna watch this because it's through no fault of anyone in the community that we have to fix this bridge every so many years, which I know we have to upkeep, I know that's important, but there are ways to do it and there are ways not to do it. So I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you for coming. So we have to.
Hi, I've lived 3 doors down from the bridge for 30 years. The amount of dust and debris, I just retired 3 years ago. I didn't think I was gonna be collecting film off my furniture, I mean, my utensils. It just seeps in the home. After I redid the whole home and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, not only am I asthmatic and have breathing problems, but the quality of the air is just ridiculous. I mean, you can feel the stuff in your lungs. And then another thing, like with the traffic, with, since the pandemic and stuff, sitting up there going into town, and you just get that exhaust, and there's just like this tunnel that the noise comes off that bridge. And don't tell me that you're in compliance with the sound on how loud it is, because I don't even think they care. I really don't. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And if there's a number, we better all have it, and they better either shut the work down or something better be done about it, because, I mean, I had 3 decks built. Every one of them got chips on there and stuff flying around. I mean, I could go on and on.
So we do know that hotline number, that if you grab the copies on there and the QR code, it's the best way to contact us immediately, that we are keeping people on track to monitor that phone. So if you're finding those issues, please don't hesitate to do that. We also have the email addresses that we're responding to for any sort of impacts. That hotline has been in place for a couple of months now, and it's going to continue to be in place throughout the construction process.
I even have 3 electronic filters on every floor that I'm running 24/7 and cleaning them out. And the ceiling fan, I mean, I could just go on and on. Just ridiculous how bad it's gotten. I never thought my retirement years, after just retiring from Gillette, was gonna be cleaning a friggin' house, a 3-floor townhouse.
If you want
that
to
I
give us your
redid.
contact information after,
It's
we can definitely
ridiculous.
talk to
I'm
you
just
further.
really angry and very, I'm from Arlington. I've been fighting for Chelsea for 30 years. And it's just like, I'm done, I'm just done. And the traffic, like when you pour it into the cities, you may, shut down one street, but then it's coming everywhere else. I mean, that's 24/7.
I mean,
Then we have
yeah,
that
the
the fires
congestion
in
is an
Canada.
ongoing
It's just
issue
been
throughout
brutal.
Massachusetts that we've run into. We are trying to,
It's
Look at
brutal.
improvements.
You may be on top of it, but I'm under it. I'm
Yeah.
walking to the park every day,
Yeah.
walking my dog, shit flying off the thing, just missing you. I mean, those were the days, the windsurfing boards flew off the thing. Just ridiculous, the amount of stuff that goes on. And it's gotten bad, but in a quality of life way, that I just can't stand it anymore. I look all the time online about moving to Winthrop, maybe get a bungalow or something, but I'm not gonna be here till 2:30 watching the bridge. I mean, I'm all for doing it, but it just, quality of life is zero, terrible there.
Yes, I'm an early, I can forget, well, thank you. I'm an early childhood educator who works with young children who have developmental delays. So the fact that I heard as a resident that young children were picking up chips and eating them in our city was particularly egregious. I just don't understand, if you know that 30% of the steel structures have lead paint, is there not some sort of routine inspection process for these kinds of things? If you know that climate change caused the delamination, then why was it a resident of our city that was letting you know that the paint was off?
so we did know we had people coming in every spring to clean up, and this project had already been initiated and fully designed prior to him coming. We accelerated the advertisement of this project based on the feedback because we wanted to get it done even faster. But we already had this project on our 5-year program, so if you had looked in the last couple of years, you would have seen that the Tobin Bridge painting was on the program already. We just accelerated it based on the feedback we received from the
That's for the project, but what about just point inspections?
We have inspections on the bridge regularly. I believe every 2 years, if not more often, on certain elements of the Tobin Bridge.
Every 2 years is a pretty long time frame.
Yeah, so there are certain elements that are inspected every 6 months. I could list them all, but that is the
6
time.
months seems long to me.
Yeah.
If you know that you have a day where it's 0 and a day where it's 50, you can anticipate that that probably happened. And then you send someone there, then you don't wait.
No, that's good feedback. So, I mean, it's definitely something we can look into. After we did get that feedback, we realized that it had been worse this year than in previous years. So that is why, based on what we had heard from Tony, as well as Green Roots, who reached out to us, that's why we initiated the cleanup crew to be out there more often, based on that feedback.
Nosotros vivimos a la par del Tobin Bridge. So, cada vez que hacen alguna reparación, el ruido es tremendo. Los compresores, aspiradoras, todo lo que usan, el ruido es tremendo. ¿Ustedes tienen algún programa o han pensado en, por ejemplo, cambiar ventanas o algo para evitar el ruido que provoca toda esa reparación en el Tobin Bridge?
Yeah, so we live next to the Tobin Bridge, and the noise when there is a construction or any work there is very bad. So is there any programs or anything that can help homeowners to maybe change windows or do something to mitigate a little bit of the noise?
So we do have a construction impact area that we showed a slide of. So if you can grab the printout, you can see that slide. From that, we are going to be coordinating with the owners themselves, not the owners, I apologize, the residents themselves to try and figure out what best suits their needs for each one. And we're looking at other noise and air mitigation measures for each resident, as well as the business owners. And so this is the area that we had as an impact area. We are, like I said, we're going to be reaching out to the business owners, the residential owners, and we're going to set up a way to get in touch with them directly. We want to make sure we're getting to the people that live in the homes, not just the owners of the homes, and that was our concern with just going with windows, because it might go to the property owner, and we were concerned that it might not improve the condition of the people living in the homes. We wanted to contact the people living in the homes directly.
Sure. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Edwin Barrientos, and I actually own 83 and 85 Chestnut Street. So I just had a follow-up comment on your one of the slides regarding cleanup on the properties. When the contractor first came out to clean the properties, they would skip a lot of properties. So I actually asked one of the supervisors that was going up and down the street, and he told me because he didn't speak with the owner, which is me, to come into the property, that they omitted the cleanup process. So I spoke with him, I gave him the okay to come in. He said he was gonna come in the next day. 2 weeks went by, and he never showed up. He came by on a follow-up cleanup, and I told him, hey, you missed my property. He said, well, tomorrow we're gonna be coming in again and cleaning up your house. They came in, they spent about an hour, and I have security cameras on my property. They spent an hour, and they had about 10 people just walking around my property. They didn't do anything, okay? Now, since that first cleanup, they haven't come by my property, and I still get chips from the Tobin. And like somebody else mentioned about little kids touching the paint, my kids play on my side yard, okay? And they touch the chips, okay? So I just want to hear about whoever's doing the cleanup, why they are not doing their job.
So I just wanted to confirm too, you did not get a response from them after they told you told them you were allowed to go on their property? Because we've been asking people to report those kind of issues to us, because if we don't receive that feedback until we come to a meeting like this, it's too late. So I would really hope that you would feel like you could report that issue, either contacting MassDOT directly, our District 6 office, or the ones handling it. So I think that's part of our concern, and is why we keep coming out and mentioning this hotline and our email addresses and our contact information in our District 6 office, because the contractors were supposed to be out there, they were supposed to be hand picking up the chips. If they weren't, we ask people to please contact us, because we are paying them to do this, but we can't be on every property at every time with our construction staff. So if you could please contact the district office, they can make sure that they instruct them to get right out there and make sure they're doing that. If you're just contacting the contractor, it can get a little bit different. So I would recommend that you reach out to our District 6 office, which is on Nealon Street in Boston, and we can give you their contact information, or you can call into the hotline, and we are monitoring the hotline to get those kind of complaints. But I'm sorry, that's what you went through. I wish we had gotten that complaint earlier so we could have gotten them out sooner.
Thank you.
He had a follow-up question, I think. Sorry.
Do you have a follow-up?
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I just want to make sure he got it.
So I am an administrator to one of our Facebook groups, which currently has about nearly 20,000 members, and I get all of the private messages about noises and dirt and everything that you can imagine related to this project. I just want to know when you guys, MassDOT, are going to be more proactive. Because every time you guys always wait until something goes wrong in order for you guys to do something. There was a comment about cement and steel exposures. There was a study in 2017 by Channel 7 and indicated that the Tobin was one of the most dangerous structures in the state, and that MassDOT was not going to do anything about it when they were speaking to somebody at MassDOT. And somebody from, an engineer from Northeastern University actually helped them do the study. So again, I just want peace of mind that you will be more proactive.
So again, I want to emphasize we did have it on our 5-year program, and unfortunately in Massachusetts, we have old infrastructure that we're trying our best to maintain. I can understand the frustration. If you can see, if you want to go to the slide that showed all the work we've been doing in the area since we took over the Tobin Bridge, we have continuously been doing projects that take multiple years in this area, which has taken longer than we would have liked, but these are all the projects since we've taken over in just the spans that we've done. I know it's never as fast as the community would want, and I apologize that you feel as frustrated as you do about it. But we're here now, and we're here to listen to you, and that's why we've since been brought to our attention by Green Roots and some of the other community members. We've done now, I think, 3 public outreach meetings. We've created a public website. We're trying to be as transparent as we can on this process so you guys understand where we're coming from, and we're going to try and continue to be so. The noise is going to be a difficult thing to remedy because of the volume of vehicles that are on that road, separate from the construction activities. There's obviously a tremendous amount of traffic going over that roadway. We'll continue to evaluate it. We did add, as part of the Chelsea curves, that fencing that you see, which is supposed to be helping with the noise as best as we can, but it is difficult having a raised roadway in the middle of a residential area that happens to have such a high volume. So we will continue to monitor it and make sure our construction activities stay within the noise, but it's very difficult for us to improve upon the amount of noise produced by the vehicles going over the roadway.
Thank you, Carrie, for being out here. I don't know that I need this. Thank you, Carrie, for being out here and for taking the brunt of our complaints. I don't think the responsibility has fallen or should have fallen on you. It should be Highway Administrator Gulliver and other folks at the DOT who have consistently, as you've heard from so many folks here, have consistently hurt the people of Chelsea. To Senator DiDomenico's point, there was dust that flew through our community in 2020 at the height of COVID. In 2021, 2022, we had asbestos piles. In 2023, if it wasn't for Tony Hernandez, we wouldn't be here today. And these are some of the inaccuracies that I find in this presentation this evening. The only reason we are here tonight and the only reason this bridge is going to be painted this year or within the next 6 months is because of Tony Hernandez. Had Tony Hernandez not alerted everybody to all of this paint all throughout our backyards and our neighborhoods all over the city, this would have been glossed over for another 10 or 12 years. It's amazing to me to see that this toll plaza and the large Mystic, the big Mystic, was painted in 2011, and yet 12 years later, the Chelsea part of the bridge that's closest to residents still is literally raining lead into our backyards and our neighborhoods. This is just completely, it's just a complete disrespect, and for me it's negligence on the part of the DOT to the people of Chelsea, and that needs to be addressed immediately and long-term. Like other folks have said, mitigation needs to be made available to Chelsea residents, these folks who've been continuing to bear the brunt of all of the pain and suffering and health impacts for decades. I wanted to ask, or not ask, but talk about the netting. The netting wasn't put in place in the spring. The netting wasn't put in place until July. It was July 20th that the netting first went up. And yeah, we know the dates. It was July. It was the middle of the summer. And we've gotten a lot of questions and concerns, and I'm sure that Edwin can attest to this, that there are a number of folks who've sent us direct messages about the netting not being on all parts of the bridge. Right now, there are some parts of the the lower deck that have netting, but not all of it. And a lot of residents have reached out and said the areas that are closest to neighborhoods still don't have netting, and the top deck doesn't have netting. So that's not protecting all of our neighborhoods, especially folks who are the closest to the bridge. We also sent you a letter at the beginning of the summer or end of June that suggested or recommended that all of the under passageways all see that netting, and that's not happening. So on Webster Ave, there's paint chips that are falling from that part of the bridge, and that's not netted at all. And the under ramp, when you're going underneath the overpass. And none of that area has been cleaned up either. We've also heard from a number of residents who've said they continue to see paint chips in their backyards all the time in the neighborhoods, and so continuous cleanup needs to happen. And so there are a number of things that I'd like to say, but the netting needs to be put in place on all aspects of the bridge immediately. We asked you for this in May, we asked it again in June. Now it's almost November, and the netting isn't complete. That needs to happen immediately, whether it's these guys' contracts and it happens on November 1st, or if it's the existing contracts. That needs to happen immediately. I have two comments. I know you're hungry.
Oh, no.
Two comments. So I heard you say that this is a 4-year project and it could have been expedited, but we don't want to bring traffic concerns to the folks who are on the North Shore. So Chelsea residents, again, have to bear the brunt. We're literally...
We're concerned about the residents going into the neighborhoods because people detour off of Carter Street when there's a backup on Tobin and they cut through all the neighborhood streets, so that was part of our concern as well as the
I would suggest you look at expediting this project. Close some lanes at night, have crews work at night.
We will have night.
This shouldn't take 4 years. Again, residents of Chelsea are going to be risking and sacrificing their lives with continuous lead paint.
Right, so we are going to
For
have it
4 years.
encapsulated by December, 120 days after the notice to proceed, so they'll be starting their work over the winter and they should have it fully encapsulated with the shielding. But the reason why we didn't do that is because generally we have seen that when there's a backup on Tobin, it does put traffic onto the local roads. A lot of people will cut through Carter Street and then they go all different ways to get to 99, and then they cut through back roads and they go up Broadway, and we just thought that would be worse conditions, especially with it happening year round. There's a lot of schools in this area, and we just didn't want to put additional traffic on people who are not local residents onto those local roads. So that was part of why we didn't want to reduce the travel lanes. In addition, we have a major bus route, a transit route that goes over it, and by reducing it, it would make it difficult for them to have that bus lane that they currently are using on Tobin. So those were some of the reasons why we felt it important to keep up the travel lanes. We will be doing night work. There could be minor closures at night, but again, the priority was because of the volume of traffic, we were worried that it would divert traffic into local roads, which we didn't think would be a benefit for the community.
You know, we're currently evaluating some options for what's the best way to get us through this winter.
Yeah.
What makes sense.
Yeah. We look at events too. We'll coordinate on events.
Yeah.
We can do longer openings where we have lane closures. We've done that where southbound and northbound are different depending on the time of day. We can do those kind of things as we progress through the project. But overall, we are emphasizing the 3 lanes because of the traffic getting poured into the city.
And since the lower levels already have the netting, we're probably going to start on the upper levels, get the platforms up, and then see where we fall in the winter. It may make sense to do a similar netting in lieu of the tops, because during the winter, high winds, those tops need to be lowered. And we've seen in much of the windy events we've had in storms that typically the following week we get a lot of cleanup for paint trips.
So just so you guys know, Steve Picasso is the District 6 construction engineer who came here tonight, and he grew up close by, it has a home in Chelsea, I think.
Two.
2 homes in Chelsea, so he is,
I'm a resident.
he knows the area well, but.
I'm interested in this mitigation there.
I'd like to just say, Terry, thank you for your presentation, really appreciate it. I have 2 questions, or 1 question or recommendation. Why didn't you take testing levels or data before 2020? So when you went back and you were trying to determine whether or not there are any hot cases near the Tobin Bridge, you went from 2020 beyond. Why not start before that? And just quickly, right? So we've seen paint. We have pictures of paint chips on people's porches, on their front door mats. They're walking that stuff into the house, right? All of that dust is likely getting into people's homes. We feel very strongly, I think you were talking to some of my colleagues this summer when I was on sabbatical, we feel very strongly that there needs to be testing offered at a place like this where Chelsea residents can come, have their families tested, instead of putting the onus on the parents to say you have to go to the healthcare center. Some folks won't go to healthcare centers, some folks don't have insurance, there are a whole number of reasons why folks don't go and get their kids tested or go to a healthcare center. We really feel like it needs to be made available at a place that is easily accessible, open to everybody and free of charge so that we can have that testing done more widely, and that would help get some of those numbers, those testing numbers up.
I'll take the first one first. So I went back to 2020 specifically, we moved to a new database. Sorry, I never speak in microphones either, I don't typically need them, although I'm a little hoarse tonight. We converted to a new database, and I was sort of better able to look at some exposure data quickly, and I was trying to get that information out quickly rather than sort of go long-term with epidemiologists back. I did also make sure I reached out immediately to our Director of Field Operations, who for many years was the code enforcement lead inspector, whose territory was Chelsea, to say, you've been inspecting homes of poisoned children, is this something that we missed? And she basically said, nope, this is where I typically am doing my inspections. I can't tell you addresses, but she basically said it's not, never saw a pattern that it was near the Tobin Bridge. And then I just basically went through the 2020 because that's when we had our new database. So that was sort of the reason why I used that time frame. It was sort of a quick way to get at that data. It is something that we can, and by the way, everyone can. One of the things I didn't put on here, there's a public health tracking tool that's on our website, and you can basically put in different lead levels and do census tract level. And I did share that information with Floor and Green Roots, and sort of we actually gave them Chelsea-specific inspection data too. So there's lots of cool tools that you can use yourselves. I mean, I'm happy to look at those too, or have FE staff look at them, but it's out there. Anybody can look at that. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece about screening is much more challenging. And I hear what you're saying, and I do see that there's some value to that, but I also see that there's a lot of downsides to it, and it's something that I really think that sort of as a community that we can sort of talk through, and I did talk a lot with Floor about it and folks with Green Roots about sort of some of the downsides of this, and so just to get into some of the logistics about blood testing or screening. I talked about the phlebotomy, so doing a venous sample. So I would not want to do capillary samples because I think it would cause a lot of stress unnecessarily, and the end result would be if someone had a high test result, they'd have to go to the doctor anyway to get the venous test, so it doesn't really get people where they need to be. The other issue, which I didn't get into too far in the weeds on, is it's sort of the American Academy of Pediatrics refers to it as the fragmentation of care. So when children go into a health center, they're getting a lot more than just the lead screening. They're having a meeting with a doctor. They're talking about the nutritional situation. They're talking about developmental delays. They're figuring out where that child is at. So there's a lot more conversation that happens that just isn't going to happen in sort of a mobile screening setting. So you really miss some really important conversations. And again, I'm not sure that it quite gets people where they need to be. So if we did a mobile setting, and I'm not saying that there isn't a place for it, because I think there could be. There was a lot of mobile testing done in the 80s and 90s when I first started at community events that were doing capillary sampling. And for the very reason that I just talked about, that fragmentation of care, it was sort of looked at like, this isn't good for the community. We need to get kids in a medical home. We need to hook people up with Mass Health. We need to get them the services they need. They need to do well baby visits, preventative care for all the things, nutrition, developmental delays, all of that. And that was sort of where we were always sort of pushing folks, is community health centers, and making sure that they had a medical home. There may be, given what we're seeing with the screening rates, maybe there is an opportunity to do something a little bit differently and think outside of the box, but we need to manage expectations, because what happens sometimes is people, unlike a vaccination where you sort of go in and it's quick, you're taking blood, so it's not quick. It's a lot more, you have to have privacy screens, you have to have a place to recover afterwards. It can be a little traumatic for kids, so if you have a long line of folks waiting and kids are crying because they're having a venous test result done, it's not a particularly happy place to be, so there's a lot of stuff to manage around that. And then the other piece of it is screening is super important. I want people to screen in Chelsea, but it's not primary prevention. If my message to you, if the one thing that you take away from me is to have your homes inspected and make sure they're free from lead hazards. Because you can screen your child, and your child could be fine today, but that doesn't mean you don't bring them home and put them in the living room or plop them someplace, and then tomorrow they're exposed. And what happens is people think, oh, lead check, baby's fine, and so I'll go back next year. And then that whole year goes by, and there's that exposure risk. So again, it's screening and making sure your home is free from lead hazards. It's in concert. But you run that risk, the fragmentation of care. They go in, they have the blood test done, and it's sort of like, okay, I don't need to think about that again. And they also don't get the appointment in the books. So then you get to the next year, so they're 9 to 12 months, and then it's the time for their 2-year visit, but they never get an appointment set up in the books, so then they miss that next. So it really sort of, you miss some opportunities about really caring for the child holistically. So I think there's some opportunity, but managing expectations, I think there's some very real downsides to doing it that way. The other thing logistically is to screen 40 to 50 kids, it's probably about 6 to 8 hours. So the amount of resources that we need to go into really make that screening rate go up. I'd rather partner with community health centers or I don't know. I think there's an opportunity to do some work with that, and I would love to. I want that screening rate to go up, so I want to think outside of the box, but I'm not sure that sort of setting up a clinic in the cafeteria is necessarily the best way to do it. But we can continue to talk about it. Thank you. I don't know if these are familiar. Thanks.
I don't need the mic. You know, I'm happy to be here and happy to know that this bridge is going to get deleted. 2018, before we came over to do the viaduct, we had a meeting exactly like this one. Wasn't here, was in City Hall. The contractor was there. They did the work. I suggested, I asked, why can we do the Tobin Bridge, the Chelsea side of the Tobin Bridge, Charlestown was done, at the same time they're doing this. So I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. The engineers were there, you know what, it's a good idea. I talked to him, I said, it's a good idea, we're looking into it. This bridge, I just retired last year from the Painters Union, so I know what I'm talking about. This bridge was going on since 2011, and it's posted out there because I've been tracking it. In 2018, it's supposed to go out in 2018. It didn't go out in 2018. And it did go out because what happened. And now let's go back to the environmental and all of this baloney about climate change is happening. But that's not why it's the paint filling out. It's the lack of maintenance. When we did this bridge, I worked in there, 1979. From 1979 to 1983, we came from Charlestown all the way to Chelsea. What's the DOT do right now? They do a little section here, go over there. It's just crazy. You know, do the job, do it right or don't do it. The problem we have today is that, you know, it's no checks and balance. It's no checks and balance out there. And let's go back to the kangaroo's pouch, the daycare center. We have a daycare center where the kids can play in the backyard. Who owns this? All these letters on the homeowners right now, a homeowner got letter in the house, he is responsible, he's paying for it. Now, all the lettuce and the soil in there, that's not his doing. Who's going to pay for that?
So the soil, we have been cleaning the soil, and we worked with the daycare center to clean it, and if you're finding that there's additional paint chips, as I've mentioned, please contact us, because we have hired crews to come out and make sure that's clean. The reason we can't do the whole bridge is I think this one alone is $120 million, and we can't, we don't have enough money to cover all the bridges that we have that we need to do. That's perfectly honest. In all of Massachusetts, I know that this is a very important structure. This money comes from tolls on the Tobin Bridge. That is how the maintenance is done on the Tobin Bridge. That is how all this construction work is done on the Tobin Bridge. The priority was given because there was concrete that was falling off the bridge, that we had to accelerate that project and keep the design going on this project at the same time. But we had a pick, and I think that was the 2021 repairs that we've been doing. And so that was the one, and the deck repairs came right before it, and then we had this one in line. So we just don't have the ability to do the entire project at one time.
Look, I'm not putting anything on you. I'm not an engineer. I'm just a painter, okay? But what I'm saying is, you know, if you see something, just take care of it. The lack of maintenance, it's a lack of maintenance what's happening. They don't watch this, they don't power watch these bridges after the winter time. You know, that salt is gonna go eat the steel, you know, it's gonna go right through the paint. Why can't they have a program where they can come in and have it? That bridge paid for itself. They eliminated, I don't know how many workers were taken out of there, not tolls there, no. Everything's done electronic. You eliminate it's money in there. It should be put into the bridge. You know, we live here and why is it that you coming over and you look at the sidewalk and the bridge there, it's dirt all over the place, you know, grass growing in there. You go to you go down the Route 90 and they cleaning up all the time, but we don't get none of that. And we're supposed to everything else. We are the gateway to Boston, and we just get them at the butt all the time. And that's wrong. That is wrong. That's completely discrimination.
So all of the Tobin money that we get in revenue from it goes to the Tobin Bridge. Every single penny. It can't get spent anywhere else. So just so you understand, so every penny that we get from Tobin Bridge is spent on the maintenance and operation of the Tobin Bridge. It just doesn't go as far as we'd like it to go. So that is part of why we have to put into multiple phases for the project.
Question for Ms. Howard. Has there been any medical research on the effect of exposure to lead dust on people who are older than 6 years of age?
The quick answer is yes. My longer answer is I am not an expert in adult lead exposure, but there's lots of different, I've seen lots of different presentations about adult lead exposure. I'm having a moment now, I think his name is Landrigan.
What about teenagers or people who are 8 years old?
Yeah, it's certainly workers. It's a huge issue for workers. And I even just mentioned when I was looking at those cases, there were two potential occupational exposures for the children, because the parents bring home the take-home lead, but if the parent is bringing home lead into their homes, there's probably some exposure happening to the parent as well. So yes, there's a lot of different, there's quite a lot of information about the impacts of lead generally on human beings. It's a neurotoxin, it does not belong in our bodies.
Well,
I'm just not an expert on...
I understand, yeah. But in that case, when you say in the presentation folder that you're going to monitor quote-unquote sensitive locations, well, the whole city is a sensitive location. It's not just a few blocks underneath the structure. O'Malley Park, where families play in the spring and summer, I find it very hard to believe, given the professional incompetence of the contractors, that they are going to be absolutely containing the dust. It's going to go right over to O'Malley Park. And so when you say you only got a budget for sensitive locations, it leaves out most of the city, which is a sensitive location.
So for the overall testing of the city, that still gets handled by the Department of Public Health. When we mentioned the sensitive locations, that's the construction impacts. We will be constantly monitoring the dust and the lead and the air emissions as mentioned. And those are the impact areas because of the construction project only. It's not for the Tobin Bridge. It's not for what is currently in Chelsea. It is meant for the construction impacts that are created during the lead removal on this construction project. We are going to evaluate if we need to do more, but what we're doing now is we have put it on the contractor to do reporting and monitoring constantly so that we're aware of the air and the noise conditions.
Can I make a comment? Let me be short. I cannot be more pleased to know which are the two contractors that are going to do this work. I know these contractors for over 20 years. They did Charlestown, they did the upper structure on Tobin Bridge, and they were there a couple of years ago too. No issues. So, and I'm going to be watching them too anyway, so just to let them know, you know. So.
And that hotline number will still be available if you have any issues.
No, I'm pleased with the, honestly, I'm pleased with the contractor that you guys picked. Class 1.
They have an airport number too, I call that, where the planes don't go directly overhead. It's not like they're rerouting them anywhere. Then I live behind the oil company. The trucks are supposed to shut off their trucks after 20 minutes, not let them run. Those run all throughout, well, they fill the whole tank up. I mean, it's just
those are not
embedded.
MassDOT highway, but I can tell you how MassDOT highway is going to work, and we will have construction staff on site during the construction of this project. You will be able to get in touch with us. We have the project website as a way for you to get in touch with us. It includes a phone number. You saw that you guys can hand mail stuff to me. I do get handwritten letters quite often. You're welcome to do that as well. But there are multiple ways that we put in place for you to contact us if you have concerns. So that's the best way I can recommend it, rather than waiting for us to come to a public meeting. Try and go through some of those. If you're not getting the response you needed, that's something we'll continue to work on. Of course. Are there any other questions? Of course.
So how do people get in touch with you if there's, well, not you personally, but with DOT if there's an issue? 'Cause I'm going to give them my phone number as well, but
We did put contact information.
is that email?
There's an email address, and there's
And
a
if people
QR
don't have
code.
email,
There's a website, and there's a phone number.
there's a phone number there too? Okay.
There's a phone number, hotline number on there as well. We actually have not had many people call it, but we do have people monitoring it so that we can get any message we receive.
Okay. If people don't feel comfortable calling DOT, you can call my office as well. That's 617-722-1650. 617-722-1650. Call our office. I have Eli here from my office. I have Ayla from my office here. You can see how important this is to me personally. And then our office, we have two of my staff and me here tonight because we want to make sure that the residents of Chelsea know they have someone that they can reach out to if there's any issues. So please feel free to always contact us.
I will also mention that Green Roots has been in touch with us, so that is another avenue. If you're not comfortable reaching out to the DOT directly, they do have our contact information and have reached out to us directly. So that is another avenue if you're more comfortable going in that manner. Okay. With that, I believe we are going to close the evening. I want to say thank you everyone for being here. This meeting officially closes at 7:46 p.m. Thank you.